Hey gang, I'm here to talk to you about posters and the and how you do those and the tech files and whatnot with those. So let's mention a few things first. In the course content, I've kind of updated the Beamer presentation and poster info section, the folder here, and I've broken it down into the Beamer information, where the lecture video for Beamer will be in there along with any files that you need, or most of the files you need. The poster lecture and info is here, and so the lecture I'm currently will be in there, and then you've got MGA image files which you'll need on your posters and possibly on your Beamer presentation later on. So it's broken down like that. Under the poster lecture info, I'll put the video in here as well. You have several folders in here. I have an examples of different posters from students in the past. I'll show you some of those here shortly. As I go through, before I go through the tech examples of those things. And then there's two different types of posters we have, a BA poster and an AO poster. A little bit more on those here shortly, but each one of those contains files with them that you need to, are links to download the files that you need to be able to create these things. And so for the BA poster here, there's a link to the landscape version of it download. I recommend you do these in landscape instead of portrait style, and you'll see the difference in between those here shortly. But the nice thing about this link, it has a direct link to open the template in Overleaf, and it gives you all the files that you need except for the image files to go in your poster. And then I'll talk about how you change all this stuff up later, and a little more about the files that come with it. Let's back up to BA poster files here. So then you have a guide, which is a loose guide on how to do different things in there. The other link that you saw in there was under the poster lecture stuff was the AO poster, which is basically the default poster style for LaTeX. The difference between the two of them is the BA poster, which is named after Brian Amberg, who created it. That's why it's called BA poster. The difference between the two, essentially, the BA poster is much flashier, more eye-catching, and that's the one I prefer you to use. But if you really just don't want to use it, I can understand that, but actually, no, I want you to use that one. The AO poster, I'm going to show you how it works. If you just really, really want to use it, you can talk to me about it. But the AO poster is very simplistic looking, and I'll show you both of them because if you go to grad school, you may have somebody who prefers one of these over the other. There are templates in Overleaf for posters. I recommend starting with these basic templates I'm giving you because they're easier to work with because they're real true templates versus some of those project templates in Overleaf are very specific to an area. So you want to be cautious when using some of those. Although you can use one of those if you want. Just if you get stuck somewhere, it may take me a minute to figure those things out, help you figure some things out with those things if it's a weird setup. Okay, so I know these two fairly well, and this is the two I'd rather you stick to. And out of the two, as you'll see when we start looking at the actual posters, the AO poster is kind of very plain Jane, whereas the BA poster is very more flashy and more attractive. Okay. And then I've got in here, you get your tech file for the AO poster style, the user guide, and something called a new sample, which is a file that you need to put in Overleaf with the AO poster. It's what they call a .bib file or bibliography file, and more on those a little bit later. But you'll need those in your project so that your references will show up on your poster, and we'll go into that in more depth here soon. Okay. So what do you need in a poster? All right, what do you need to have on the poster? What should be there? Well, really, this is an extension of your. It's essentially an extension of your presentation. So if you couldn't give a presentation at a conference, maybe you can get into what they call a poster session. And so you could turn your talk that you would have normally given if you can't get into doing an oral presentation, you can turn it into a poster and do a poster session. Poster sessions are often done in big groups, and so you won't be the only person in a room with a poster, but you'll be one of many, and the more attractive you make your poster, the more likely you're going to get somebody to look at it. So what you kind of want on your poster for sure, there's a few elements you definitely have to have on your poster. You have to have an abstract, or a introduction. Either one, your abstract that you're writing in your research checks now can be the first thing you put on there. Don't have to call it an abstract. You can call it an introduction if you want. So it's got to be that type of thing, some kind of intro to telling what you're about. The abstract is really more of what you would give to the conference folks, and because it has to be a certain length. It can only be so long, an abstract, because they put those things in pamphlets and things like that they hand out at conferences, so they don't want those things to be too long. But really an abstract is just an introduction and basically a paragraph about what your research is on. You need contact info is the second thing you got to have. Contact info can go in several different places. You'll see them in different places on the posters I show you. Contact info is basically your name needs to be on the poster somewhere, and your email address at least. Some people put their phone number on there, but I don't require you to do that. And if you do put a phone number on there, you can just make a fake one up. One guy did, just 5555555 as his phone number. But again, you don't have to put that on there. But the other two things do need to be on there somewhere. Then you have your references, which will be pulled in from that bibliography file I made mention of a minute ago. I'll show you more about that later. All other details that you put on your poster really come from your Beamer slides and what your research is on. So you don't have to put everything that's on your slides on your poster, but you want a good representation of to give the person who's looking at the poster, if you're not standing there, an idea of what you're talking about and what your research was about. So you'll see in the different posters I show you from students in the past that people did slightly different things depending on their research. If you're doing original research, then the templates that I'm going to show you shortly for both the AO and the BA poster styles will have like certain set content boxes or whatever, however you want to call them, like little sections that are labeled out a certain way. You do not have to keep those labels or include all those things that are on there. You can change that up. But the three things you definitely want on there, actually I should say the four things you definitely want on there are abstract, contact info, references, and you want your institutional or your organizational logo or name on there as well. And you'll see that. That's what the MGA JPEGs and stuff are for, is for you to be able to do that. And you'll see that in the templates here shortly. Any image files you import or include graphics like we did in Lab 5 need to be high resolution. They need to be pretty large. You want to find the largest representation of that file as you can, or the one that has the most pixels in it, because we're going to blow these up to 3x4 posters, and I will print these out and put them in the hallway like the ones you've seen in the math hallway on the Macon campus. So these will get represented, and we'll replace some of the very older ones with yours. So that'll be cool. So you want to make them look good because people will see them. But when I blow it up, if the image file is not a higher resolution one, and it will tend to pixelate the image and not look as good when you blow it up. So sometimes those are hard to find. So just do your best on that. Last thing I want to say, and I've already referenced this a little bit earlier, you want to make your poster pleasantly pleasing to the eye. In other words, you want to draw somebody in like a spider's web. You kind of want to bring them in to bring their attention to your focus to your poster. Even if they're across the room, they see, oh, that's a cool looking poster from across the room. Let me go see what that's about. That's how you get people to walk up and ask you questions and talk to you about your research, and how you meet other people who might be interested in doing further research with you at things like a conference. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind. So as I said, there's two poster types, the BA and the AO. So let me talk a little bit about those before I actually show you those files in Overleaf. So each one of these has a .tex file to it and what they call a .bib file. The bib file is your bibliography file, and I'll show you more about that when we get into it, but both of these have that. The BA poster, because it's not a prototypical or package built into LaTeX, has what they call a class file or a .cls file. You don't have to do anything with the CLS file. You just have to have it in your folder where your tech file is, so that your tech file knows how to compile that document and get your PDF to look the way you want it to look. So that's just something you have to have in there. And when you click on that link in the BA poster, that comes along with it. So it's not something you have to bring along. The other thing you want to include in your folders in Overleaf will be image files. And you'll see I'll have a bunch of them in mine. But any images you want to include need to also be in the folder, just like in Lab 5. So if your images are in that particular project or folder in Overleaf, then it will, and when you call them forth to include graphics in your document, they will show up. All right. That's pretty much it for that. So let's get into looking at some demos now. So let's I'm going to show you some poster examples of the AO poster to start. This is the one I don't prefer that you use, and you'll probably see why. They don't look terrible, but they look kind of boring. And boring's boring. So not that these are bad, they're just perfectly fine, but the AO poster typically looks something like this. Now, this is the landscape format. You can also do it as a portrait. I recommend landscape because wider is usually better with posters, especially presentation posters or conference posters. The vertical ones look okay, but it depends on what the content is. Sometimes it looks better one way or the other. I'm going to say go landscape. If you really want to go portrait, that's totally up to you. I'm not going to hold you to that one. But notice her Sarah McMahon's poster from a few semesters back. She's got an abstract, an intro, and then she lists after her introduction. I really don't know that these are both necessary. The introduction's really more looks like a history to me when I'm looking at it real quick, because it starts out in 1991. Scott Field was the first person, blah blah blah. And it gives some definitions in there. Some people, instead of an introduction box, they'll put their abstract or call their abstract the introduction, and then they'll for their intro they'll actually refer to that as history or something else. You'll see it differently in different posters that I show you. Down here, what she did was she listed her topics, and those are her sections from her Beamer presentation, and then she kind of followed that as she went down. I don't feel like the topics section is necessary here if you're going to mention those things anyway, but she probably did that to kind of take up some space, because she probably didn't have enough to fill all the way through all three columns here. And as you'll notice, this has got column breaks here between the three columns, and that's because this works off of the multi-cols package. So it's essentially using multi-cols set to 3 columns, and that's how this is created. So it's very straightforward. I won't have to spend a lot of time explaining this one to you here in a minute when we look at the tech file. There are a few things that I'll show you how to turn it from portrait to landscape. But other than that, the other thing she's got in here is future research. If you're planning on looking into your topic further, maybe you mention what you're interested in looking in next there. The rest of the stuff came directly from her slides, so I won't go into depth on that. But notice there's some mathy stuff, there's some images, and then she's got references down bottom. This is what the bib file does. When we see the bib file in a minute, you fill in your relevant information in the format that they have in the bib file, and then when you compile your tech file, it fills in that box automatically for you in the correct format. So it's kind of nice. The header above is the other thing I want to make mention of for the AO poster. Usually the image over here takes up the right-hand side of this the header. And then over on the left-hand side, you'll have the title. So with your titles, they don't have to be the title I gave you for your topic. You can change the title up to match what your when you finally tuned your topic into that. So have fun with that a little bit. And then she's got her name and her contact information. She probably didn't need a Middle Georgia State University Department of Mathematics. But she could probably just put Department of Mathematics up there and have the MGA over here. That would have been sufficiently fine. But this is a good looking poster for what it is. But it's just kind of drab. It gets the point across, but it's nothing. It doesn't scream at you. If you look at this from across the room and there are 4 other posters that look kind of like this style, you'd probably go which one. You wouldn't know which one to go to first. The other one was one of students I advised a few semesters ago. Zach Robinson decided to go this route. And he's got his abstract. It looks a little bit different. It's smaller, and you'll see why, because the template kind of does it this way. And then he goes through definitions and conditions instead of doing an introduction. He talks about the different aspects from his slides are actually in here very well. He's basically used his slides to kind of phrase out the rest of his written up stuff, and he has conclusions where a question he asked and it was answered, and gave some expressions why, and then has his references. So he just filled his 3 columns. The one difference between his and hers was that he put images in the header of his. I had to help him with this. It's not that difficult to do. So if you do this, well, you're not. Hopefully you're not going to go this route, but if you did, I can help you with that header because it takes playing around with a little bit. So let's look at the actual LaTeX code in the bib file that you get with AO Poster. So I'm over here. I've got my AO Poster here, .tex file, which is what I'm currently on here. And the basic version of it that I gave you in D2L will be just this, pretty much this format. And I've got my MGA institutional logo that you see actually on the poster in several places in different sizes. And then I've got my new sample.bib. So whether that's just the name we called it, it's usually called sample.bib. This one's called new sample.bib because we used to have issues with compiling these bib files along with the tex files in the way we used to do it before we used Overleaf. Haven't had any issues with the bibliography file since moving to Overleaf. It seemed to work pretty well. So what you want to pay attention to is the format of each one of these. So there's several articles in here, and there's a miscellaneous one, which is a website, and there's a book. So there's some examples in here. There are other examples of different types of references that you may run into that are out there on the. There's some. If you just Google search .bib file, how to do a. If you were doing a magazine instead of an article, how to do a magazine reference in a .bib file in LaTeX. Somebody's probably got this kind of little structure here. Notice each one starts with an @ article or @ book or whatever, and then it gives a paraphrase name. That's a reference name. I'll show you where that's used in the document later. And then it kind of gives what each thing equals, and it ends. There's a begin and end bracket between that stuff. So you want to keep the format like this so that it works. You don't have to have this many references as this particular document's showing, but so you can delete what you don't need. But the way it's going to order them is it's going to order them from the bottom up. So if order matters to you in this case, make sure you order them the way you want to order them from the bottom up, and it will order them like this miscellaneous one here is the first one mentioned, and then the next article is the second one, third, fourth, fifth, and then the article with Smith 54 is the sixth thing referenced on the poster. If you look over here, you'll see the references at the bottom of the poster right down here. And the sixth one's that G. Smith. All right, so that's pretty much it with the bib file. I'll show you how it's called forth here in a moment. It's pretty much in the template. If you just use the template as is, you don't have to fool with this much. Okay, in the tex file, you'll notice you'll have a document class. It's got A0 in there. That stands for the paper size. And then you've got your portrait. Is what style it's in now, because obviously it's vertical, vertically aligned. And then you got your class, which is your document class, your AO poster. So it's calling forth that. And then anything that's below here, I would leave these things in here. So multi-col is because it's doing multiple columns in there. You need that package. You need several of these packages and some of these rules in here. So this column separation rule tells how far you want, the spacing between the columns of the poster. And so if you want to change that, you can. You can change the column sep rule as well, which tells how thick that line is. So you can make that line fairly thick if you want to. Actually, I think thicker might even look better if it's not too thick. Okay. And then you've got some other things in here that are just random stuff that they threw in here that they used when they made the template. You can also add any of your new commands and packages that you may use, like the TIX package. They didn't throw it in here, but if you're going to draw an image, you may need the TIX package in here. So anything you used in the past in the labs that you may think you want to use in your poster or in your Beamer presentation, throw those in your preamble because they're worth it. Below that, the last package on here is one you haven't seen before called WrapFig. I'll show you where that's used in the document here shortly. But that's kind of a neat thing where it wraps the text around a figure or a table. All right. This one, they just begin and end documents. The whole thing, the poster from here on out is contained in the begin and end document like any other thing we've done. All right. The poster header, which is defined up here from the name and the university department, the fake phone number up through the title, and the big MGA logo up in the right-hand corner is all defined right here. So this is kind of nicely laid out. It shows you where the images are. So here's where you would, the institutional logo shows up, that specific one, that JPEG. And then you can change the names and the titles and stuff in here as you want. You can get rid of this phone number if you don't want it in there. Kind of play around with that. And they're using colors like navy blue, which are not, as you noticed, I didn't have those predefined in my preamble. We predefined colors before in the preamble, but what they did was they used these SVG names for the Xcolor package up here, and they're able to go to this website here and call forth different color names based on what's on that website. So you can look there for that if you want to change colors of the text and stuff. That way you can just use like color navy blue instead of text color and then putting stuff in there. It'll go ahead and just color that. What it does when you use just the color, it will change the color overall until you change that, until you put a new command in there that says /color in a different color name. So you notice it goes from navy blue in the abstract over here to like a brownish color in the introduction. That's because once they finished the title here in navy blue, I'm sorry, that's what I was looking at, the navy blue. Then they went back to black for the rest of the text, and they did that by changing color black right here. So it stayed black until they got to the abstract. And once they started the abstract is where they actually started doing the multi-columns. All right, so the multi-cols set to 2 right now because it's vertical. And we're going to change that up because I want to make this easier to look at. We're going to make it 3 columns. And when I do that at first, we're going to find that there may be an issue. I didn't change anything there. It still looks somewhat okay, but there's a lot of white space at the bottom. That's because I still have it set to portrait. And I really want it to be landscape. So this is how we can turn it into landscape. Just change, put the word landscape up here and recompile. And it does that, but notice there's still stuff hanging off the ends of on the second page. Well, to fix that in here, I need to change this image size up top here because it's pushing stuff down and not leaving me enough room up top. So the image is between these things called mini pages. So that title bar across the top, here's where your name and all that stuff is. And notice it has a 0.75 line width. That's saying that this section right here with the unnecessarily complicated research title is taking up 75% of the width of the page, or where the actual line width minus the margins. And the other 25% is taken up by that image. But I've got this image set to a width of 14 centimeters, which is also affecting its height. So if I change this to something like 10 centimeters, which should be big enough anyway, and recompile, I bet we get everything on one page, and we do. So playing with that image up there is, you can do several different things to alter the width and the height of that thing to kind of get everything on one page. That being said, we move down into the multi-cols, and we're going to look at the abstract first. So I'm going to go through this fairly fast. Notice they did color navy, all right, for the abstract, and they began their abstract and they end their abstract. That's why the word abstract is centered in that thing's the first line is indented, is because it's apparently something they've written in the code to draw the abstract out that way. You don't have to do it because if you noticed on Sarah's, she didn't treat it that way. She treated it like all the rest of these sections, like the introduction and whatnot, where the title's to the left aligned and then everything just comes below it and without any indent. So after that, they changed their color to saddle brown. So if you change the color all the time, you can remember to put those changes in there. And then they just call it section star. That's how it gives that title bold and automatically bolds the title and properly does the left alignment. And then there's a bunch of Latin below that. Okay. And the next section down is main objectives. They changed the color to something called dark slate gray, and they named their section main objectives, and then they did an enumerate lists. So all your listings and tables, all that stuff you've used before, work in here too. Ticks, images, things like that. Materials and methods are one of those weird sections that for you guys being math majors, and the fact that you're just doing more of your research is a little different than a scientist would do. Like, it makes sense to have materials and methods in a science class, but not maybe so much in this class. So materials and methods is not a section you have to have in your document. If you were using lab equipment, or you were doing your project revolved around maybe experimentation of some sort, and you used specific items like dye or something like that, then you might want to list those there. That's a good spot for things like that. But you guys are probably not going to do that, so this section could be something completely different. They have materials and methods. They have something called they called it a subsection, and I don't see that it really did anything any different there, because it says mathematical. Oh, this is materials and methods. It says subsection mathematical section. So there, notice the mathematical section's like smaller. So if you want to make it a smaller but bolded, you call it a subsection. So theoretically, this one is written out more like real truly just methods. And then they start listing their mathy stuff in there. And you'll do this in different ways, but there's some good examples of how you can get what they call equation arrays and things like that. Something a little bit different take on the math, some of the math environments where we aligned equations together. It's another way to do that. And then they end up right here with this little line down bottom here, a bunch of more Latin and some mathy terms. And then they bring up a new section called results. Results is where they use the wraparound fig, because notice the text is wrapped around that table there that they've got in the right here. All right, so the way they get that is they begin their first couple of sentences here, and then they do their wrap table, and they build their table as normal, but they begin and end wrap table, and you can either left align that or right align that table as a whole. So it tells it where you want it to go. And put a caption and all that good stuff in there. And then they completed their paragraphs, and it just wrapped it right around it. It's kind of neat you can do that. It is useful in some places. It was just something I thought you guys should know that you can do. All right. And then it's got the image there centered, and another table below that. And then it jumps over to the next line with another paragraph right here. Another image inserted a little bit larger, just for sake of having some space used up, I assume. And then they've got a conclusions, and they changed their color back to saddle brown. Section conclusions, and then they began an itemized list for their conclusions. Conclusions are really meant more for original research, like what you're concluding up about it, but you can also use it in your research, concluding what you found out about the stuff, or kind of like a wrap up of things if you want. Is that necessary? Probably not in most of your cases, but if you want to use it, it's okay to use that. The forthcoming research box right below that, they changed the color back to dark slate gray and did their forthcoming research. And notice they've got, other than the Latin here is not the thing I care about, but they have this cite SMIT54. That's how they're citing the reference of from the references section below. And notice that on the poster there, if I blow this up a little bit for you so you can see it a little bit better. If I look at the poster section below right there, right here under forthcoming research, I have a boxed 6. And that's referencing this reference down here. So you can reference your references within your document by doing cite/cite and then listing the name of the reference from your bib file. So that one in the bib file was the one at the very top, what they called SMIT54. So you want to name your references something quick and easy to remember, so you can cite them back if you want to do that. I don't think you need to do that often, but if you feel the need, like you quoted somebody, it's worth doing that. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. And you can do this in either one of these. You can do this either with the BA poster as well. So a lot of these tricks you're seeing in the intermediate in the body of the work here could be done in either one. The references. This is how it's brought up. For some reason, they have this command called no cite. It says print all references regardless of whether they were cited in the poster or not. Is what this does. It kind of overrides it. So sometimes it will only reference those that are cited if you don't have this command in there. Bibliography style plain, you don't have to change that. There's different styles of bibliographies that you can have it do, so but plain's perfectly fine for this. And then they call forth the file new sample, the bib file, from over here. All right, so it's just called new sample in this one, and I guess why I gave you the new sample file. It's just called sample.bib for the BA poster, and we'll see that here in a minute. The acknowledgments, you don't have to have acknowledgments. Acknowledgments are usually there for folks who have been working with other people or had help from other people, and you want to give acknowledgments to folks. So that's not there. But what you do notice about this, let me get this back to fit on page, is you've got your abstract. Up top, they've put their contacts. Their organizational logo is up there, and their references. Those are things you have to have on there. Okay. I like the term main objectives here instead of like on Sarah's poster she put topics. The main objectives is another way to list the things that you were looking into and why you were interested in it. That's another way you can do that. All right. That's pretty much it to this. You can draw text pictures, like I said, and do other things in here. You can spice it up a little bit. You can change the colors, like John didn't have a lot of color in his. And so, but again, it's still kind of very plain looking. It's very straightforward. It looks like an article or a paper you would read in a journal, which is fine for journals. But if you saw this across the room, would you be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go check that out? Probably not. It's not going to catch your eye, okay? But notice it wraps it up with the in multi-calls and then in document, all right? So that's AO poster in a nutshell. So let's turn our attention to the BA poster, all right? Notice I have the CLS file, the .tex file, and down here I have my sample file. Everything else is an image file. I don't really need all those images, but I have them in there because I was playing around with it in different ways. So this is very similar to the new sample.bib, and you can actually pull the stuff from either one of those to pull over into this one. So if you have a specific, like the miscellaneous one that you wanted to put here, you could add it to this. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But the basic breakout of this, and then we'll look at some examples here in a minute. But the basic BA poster looks kind of like this. I'll compile here. It takes a second for these to compile because they're pulling off of that class file I told you about. A little flashier, a little nicer looking, a little more attractive to the eye. Okay. This one works like a matrix. And so what I'm going to show you in the examples before I go into the tech full out is I want you to notice something about this the poster image over here. Where objective starts here is really kind of an introduction, more so than the introduction is. But it's really your abstract rather than your objectives, but this is what the template calls it. Okay, but this column right here with objectives, with the box objectives, materials and methods and references is column 0. So you think about a matrix, this is column 0, and objectives is in column 0, row 0. And then the introduction starts column 1, and the results starts in column 2. But it spans over 2 columns, so it's actually in column 2 and column 3. And so it spans up. So you have up to 4 columns, but they number them 0, 1, 2, 3. And then usually you don't want any more than 3 rows, so 0, 1, 2 rows. And so that's something we'll need to know when we get into the code. But you can structure this thing in many different ways. This is not the only way you can structure this poster. A lot of different looks. So let's look at the examples, look at what people who've done this in the past have included in their posters. and some that I think are good examples I pulled up here. So here's one Nikki did. You guys, if you're on the Macon campus, you know Nikki. She helps Jonathan in the MARC, run the MARC. She's the assistant director down there. She did hers on dynamical systems and had a little bit of fun with the color on it. I'll show you how to change all that stuff. But notice the layout's a little bit different. She still has a similar layout in the first column and but the middle column is where she had it span over 2 columns for both of these things and had the boxes be bigger to fit the things she wanted in there. So it's really all depends on what you want to fit on your boxes on how you lay this out. So these content boxes are kind of cool. And you can change the look of them. Notice hers are rounded at the tops and what they call small rounded at the bottom. So it kind of has a nice look overall. That's something we can change as well. Let's look at another one. Here's Erica James. I showed you her Beamer presentation. This is her poster. So this is a good representation of going from Beamer slides to poster so you can see how she did this. Going from one to another. Notice she's got abstract and some definitions, and then her references in the first in this column 0. She's got double span columns for column 1 and column 2, and she's got her big overall proof of the Bayes theorem, both formally and informally, I guess, and then a little history box. So the order in which you put these things is also up to you. And then the real world applications mentioned with a little bit of an example of how they found a black box for Flight 447, the Air France flight, using Bayes theorem. And then her contact information is in a little box down below. Now, if you want to put your contact information in this box up here, like where she has her name at the top row or top bar, the header bar, you can do that. You can put your name and email address and just leave the contact information box out down here and put other stuff there. So the one thing you do want is the school logos on either side because it just looks good. And I will say you can have the only one-sided, but what happens is it pushes the title to the left, and it looks kind of skewed and kind of weird. So I think having it centered always looks best. We'll see an example where I think somebody did that here in a minute. This is one Adam Seward did the first year I taught this class, and this was original research, very similar to a topic that we'll hear about from Gareth, where they mentioned Riemann's rearrangement theorem and conditionally convergent series, but he intermingled his with music and looked at conditionally convergent series in music. So his presentation was pretty good. His poster's pretty nice. It's a little bit wordy. It's not as attractive as the previous two we looked at because there's not as many images on the poster, but it's still not a bad looking poster. All right, but there's a lot of reading on it. This one's really nice. It's short and concise. This is actually the same type of poster. He pulled and turned the borders off, and you can do that as well around the boxes. So the content boxes are still there, but he made the top of them totally squared off at the tops, and then removed the borders. So, and I'm pretty sure he did this because if you notice below in this middle box where he's got proof by example, and down bottom he's got G star equals 1 minus 4 minus yada yada yada. He's got a lot of white space there, and if you have the outlines to those boxes there, what happens is that outline needs to match up with something like the bottom of the references box if you have the outline around it and the definitions box. And so he would have had a bar that would have come all the way down bottom here and had a bunch of white space, and it probably just didn't look good. So removing the borders around the content boxes can sometimes be a good thing, especially when you don't put as much on your poster. All right, so this one's a little bit nice, and he's got his abstract, his definitions. He's got a proof by example, the method used, future direction, talking about where he wanted some other things he wanted to look at as far as that pertain to his virtual knots and how it deals with protein structures, and then gave his references. So it's pretty nice graph. So let's look at the LaTeX code. All right. So again, this is created by Brian Amberg, and again in document class you're going to call it baposter over in the last set of curly braces, and in square brackets you can list a bunch of different things. So you can actually adjust the overall font scale in here if you want with this one, which is nice. So if your font's too big and you're pushing off the page, sometimes you can adjust that a little bit to pull things all back on one page. You got your paper size, the AO paper. It's the same paper size as in the AO poster. It's the typical poster 3x4 poster size. And this one's in landscape already, although you can do this one in portrait. I don't recommend it. It doesn't look as good in portrait, in my opinion. And then you've got a couple things down here which are always useful. We've got still a column set rule and the column set length rule and things like that you can alter if you need to. You don't really probably need to do that here. And you got your multi-col package because we used it within some of these boxes. All right, it's not used like in the AO poster where everything was multiple columns. This one, each content box is its own thing, and you may do multi-cols within it, especially when you span over several rows. The ticks package is in there because this particular image right here in the conclusions box was drawn with ticks, and they needed the shapes and arrows package in there to call that forth, so those things are useful. They've got this new command that was written specifically by the authors called compress list. And what compress list does is you'll notice this list in the conclusions box where it's got the bullet points here. That's what they call a compressed list. So anytime you want a list to be kind of compressed together so it's will fit tighter in a box, you can add this command compressed list right after you start your begin enumerate or begin itemize list, and it will compress the list down and make it like squeeze together more nicely. It was used in this bulleted list here in the conclusions, but in the descriptions list they didn't use it, so you can see there's more space there. I would predefine my colors I wanted to use. You'll notice the use of color is primarily on this. There's two places you can change the color here. In the header bars here, you can change the colors. You can do that there, and you can also change the overall background on this document. So behind the research title, behind these boxes here, you'll notice that it's all white. I recommend sticking with all white because when you print one out that has color background, it can cost you a lot more money, or in the poster ink is not cheap. So that being said, list your colors out here that you may want to use. And the reason I have purple and silver here, and the light blue is there because that comes with your template. So you can use RGB rather than HTML if you want, but I'm showing you both versions of this. I use silver and purple here to kind of match up the colors for the school. And I apologize if you hear a child singing in the background because I cannot get her to be quiet for some reason today. Anyway, notice that my headers go, and it's hard to see right now, but I'll zoom in on it. Notice they go from dark purple to a lighter purple. That's because you can do these as gradients. And you saw Nikki's example earlier, it went kind of green to purple. So you can have some fun with the coloration here. You can have them solid colors all the way across if you want, but you can have them two-tone to go from left to right. You can also make the background of the overall image do that as well. And so listing any colors you may use for those purposes up here, and you can get as specific as you want. I don't require that you use purple, although purple does look good with the Middle Georgia State logo up top. But that doesn't mean it's the only color that looks good. Okay, so you can have some fun with that. Let's fit this back to the screen so we can see it all. All right, so right after that, you can put your other new commands you may use, like text bold font, display style, math bold font, or bold symbol is the other one I like. After begin document, you begin poster. So you'll end this document with end poster and then end document. All right, so everything fits in between the begin and end poster from that top. Let's get back up there from the top right here. Okay. And so the very first thing you see in these sets of curly braces from here to here is a set of like options that you have, like on and off switches or different item options you can choose for your poster. And I'm going to go through those here pretty quickly. The header border equals closed. I don't know what the other options are for that without looking in the manual for BA poster, but it adds adds a border around the header of content boxes. So that's where it's adding a border around this box. All right. So if it's closed, it means it's adding that. All right. Column spacing, you can space between your columns. You can change that from 1 EM. I don't remember what EM actually stands for, but it's another measure, a unit measure of specific to printing for giving you space. Background, I have it set equal to none right now. That's the color of the background. You have different options here if you decide to color your background. I'm asking you not to do that right now, but in the future, if you wanted to do it, it's possible. So right now I have it set to none, so it's white. The entire background to the very overall poster is white. But you have plain, so if I put plain in here, it's going to do the following. It made the background like a silvery gray, and the reason why it's doing that is because right below it I have background color 1 and 2. And since I made it plain, it made it all one color, and it made it all silver. And I did a exclamation 90, which means I reduced the darkness of the silver by 10%. So the smaller I make this number, the lighter that will get in there. And this is a good way to, like, if you wanted to have color in your boxes there, in your content boxes, you could do that there. That would be okay. But you could do a really light gray or something like that, which might set it apart. But you don't want it on the overall poster because that's just a bunch of ink, all right? So remember, I'm going to print these out, and you may not want to do that. The background color, too, is if you want it to look like a gradient. So you'll see these other options here like shade LR and shade TB. The shade LR stands for shade left to right. The shade TB stands for top to bottom. So if I take the top to bottom, for example, and put it in place of plain, it should go from silver 90 to red 20. All right. And if I just wanted to go straight silver to red, I would remove that exclamation and the number that comes after it. And it does that. So you can kind of get a semblance of a gradient look from one color to the other. Now, it's not super fancy, but sometimes that can look good on some posters depending on what you're trying to do. All right. So I'm going to change this back to none for now. And look at some of the other things here. So while that's compiling, I'm going to look. So right below background color 1 and 2, and that's mainly for the overall poster, you have border color of your boxes. And it's set to black, so that's why these are each have a black border around them. If I change that to any other color, of course, it'll change that color. You've got your header color 1 and header color 2. That's why mine look like they do, like they're going a gradient, like a dark purple to a light purple, because I made my color 1 purple on the left. And this is automatically set. I'm pretty sure you can change this. Probably need another it's probably header background equals is probably something in the thing. We don't really need it. And so if you want to make the color solid, you can just change this header color 2 to purple straight up, and there won't be any gradient there. But so for example, if I change this to green, this should look very similar to the one Nikki did. And there it is. So it's going from purple to green and kind of gives a cool gradient. So you can have some fun with that. I recommend doing, having some fun with the color there in your headers for your boxes. Okay. But you can do that there. You can set the header color font color to, like, right when it's dark you want it white, but when it's a lighter color maybe you want it black or some other color. You can do that. Box color is the color of the background for inside your box, not the color outside of the poster. Like that's the overall background out here, but the background of each one of these. So again, like I did a minute ago, I could call this silver percent, let's say 20, kind of a light gray color. And if I do that, my boxes should become lighter gray on the inside. So if you want it to stick out, when you blow that up, that's actually not that bad looking. All right. It's not necessary, but it's not that, it doesn't look bad. Okay. So you can do that as well. You can change the header shapes. You've got some different options here written in the commented out comment right after this header shape. So you can do rectangular, small rounded, rounded right, rounded left, or rounded. Currently, the way these are set at the top, it's got the rounded edge on the right, and at the bottom, it's got a rounded edge on the left. And that's because the text border is what's making the sides and the bottoms of the box. The header shape is just talking about the top of the box. So the text border is set to rounded left, and I think that if you're going to do the rounded left or right, that you're better off to do them offset like this. But you could do this. This is what Andrew did to get his with no borders and everything. He went to the header shape and changed that to rectangle. And then for his text border around here, one of the options is none. So we could put none in there. And then if we recompile it, it may not look exactly the way we want it to, but it doesn't look bad. Notice what it did though, and there's something else I need to change here. It's still got a thick border around the top of the boxes, and I don't really like the way that looks, and you probably don't, but at the bottom of these options here, you've got a line width. Set that equal to 0 and recompile it, and we should see just the box without the thick border, and that looks pretty good. So if you wanted to do something like that, you could overall, and as an overall thing, it doesn't look that bad. Okay, I like the boxes around it because it gives separation for the person, so they don't feel confused. But if you have minimal stuff on your poster, then probably going without borders like Andrew did is not a bad thing. Let's change this back to the way we had it. All right. So let's get into the meat and potatoes here. So the very first thing you'll get into right after these settings also you can change at any time. So don't feel like you have to change them in the beginning. You can fiddle with that up until the time you're completely satisfied with what you got. The title section up top here, along the top border here, is set up like this. I would not fool with this much. You've got your logo on either side defined by include graphics here and here. And then you've got your research title, and then in brackets below that is your name. Nikki didn't put her name there. She put the area mathematics that she was looking at, chaos theory. So you can do that as well. If you're going to put the contact information down bottom, your name can go down there. Okay, so that's an option for you. It's really up to you what you decide to include up here. And you can not include anything right there if you want. You just leave that blank, but you'd probably want to remove the boxes from there as well because it's got the curly braces that will show up if you don't take those out. So be careful with that. But if you leave that set up the way it is, it's fine. One of the on and off options you have here I didn't show you was, where's it at? Eye catcher. The images across the top is what they call your eye catcher at the top. It's set equal to true, and that's why it's showing both images on either side. If you just set this to false and recompile, it will shift the title to the left and just have the one image on the right. So this is an option you have as well. It doesn't look that bad. It looks okay, but it feels like it's offset a little bit. But if it's something you prefer, you can do this. It's totally up to you. I'm not going to tell you which format you want. I like the double images. Some of you, and I know Gareth may be interested in doing this, likes to be a little artistic with the stuff, so maybe you want to put a different image on either side. Be careful using two different images on either side of this. The sizing of them is going to be important because you're going to have to play around with the height, the number of pixels that are in each one of those things to get them to match up so it doesn't look uneven. So using different images can kind of make that a little bit difficult. If they're the same size, that's great, but often two images are rarely the same size. Okay. Then after that, we get down into the boxes. So as I said, it's made up like a matrix. We've got column 0, 1, results starts in column 2 and spans over to column 3. All right, so you can kind of see that, but 0, 1, 2, 3 gives us 4 columns, and there's technically 4 rows, but realistically it depends on how you set it up. This one really only has 3 rows. And it's just the way the boxes are spaced between them. So let's get into how we do that. So the objectives box, first of all, we're gonna when we start listing our boxes with this particular package, objectives, the boxes that go across the top row 0 here, have to be listed first. All right, so you have to put these in this order. So it doesn't matter what order you want your poster to be read in. These have to be entered first in your LaTeX document. So the very first one is objectives. And so you do / header box. The title there, if you want it to be abstract rather than objectives, or if you want it to be something else, can go there. But whatever you name this here, whatever you give the name that shows up on the screen up here, you also have to name it here. And what the name equals does is allows us to call back to that when we're trying to do certain alignments. We can do special alignments by calling back to say, hey, align this new box with the objective, the bottom of the objectives box, or the top of the objectives box. So it allows us to call back to these things later in the document. The column equals 0, row equals 0 says that's the first box we're placing right in column 0, row 0. So it knows to place it there. And then they put whatever they want in that box. And then they close. Notice there's an open curly brace and an end curly brace. So this is all the stuff you want has to go between a begin and end curly brace. All right. Be careful with giving spaces. Don't put that first curly brace on the next line down, because sometimes the program might scream at you when it's trying to compile. Then it moves on and it starts after that objectives box. It names the results 1 box. Well, that doesn't make sense because it's not going in order, but the order doesn't matter here because you can place things where you want, but the alignment matters here. And so the reason they did their results 1 box next was they called it results 1, but they named the box as a reference as results. You can shorten these names if you want, but make sure you find where they occur elsewhere in the document and change them there as well. That's one of the things that can catch you off guard with this platform. Starts in column 2. It spans over 2 columns, and it's on row 0. So here we are, still on row 0, and results starts in column 2 and spans over 2 rows. That's how you get it to stretch over multiple columns. I mean, not rows, but columns. And then in that box there, they did a multi-calls of 2, and you can see how they entered their stuff. I won't spend a lot of time on that. But they got their figures and their stuff in there that they wanted. And then they brought back and put their introduction box in between it. All right, so you could probably have done this in 2 different orders, but sometimes you'll have a box that's just perfect the way you want it, and you want another box to align it. And so when you have these borders around it, having the boxes align at the bottom is kind of important. So the way they did this with the introduction box was they called it introduction. They named it introduction. It starts in column 1, which is next to column 0, or the objectives box, and it says bottom align it with the results box. So they knew the results box was going to have a lot of stuff in it, and they said, I want this new box to be aligned at the bottom with results 1. And so they made it do that. Okay, so that's one way. Another way you can align things at the bottom so that things match up, so they look kind of uniform, if you will. Takes a little bit of playing around with this one, I'm not going to lie. Next, now that we've done the top row, they list the boxes in the bottom row. So what it does, it's essentially what we're doing is we're going to list the top row boxes, then we're going to list our bottom row boxes, and then we're going to fill in the boxes in between it, because we'll have references to on how to place those boxes where we want them. So the references box down below is the first one we've got, and this is our bibliography. And so it's a shorter one for this one, but it depends on your research, right? So again, it's header box references. They named it references. It's in column 0, and this time we're just saying, hey, put it above the bottom. So this is why it places it at the bottom, and we'll draw it. So this is why it's important to place the bottom ones next. All right, at least this first one. Once you place this first one, and notice this is very similar to the bibliography style stuff, although it's a little bit different, a little slightly different. They got a different one called bibliography style UNSRT, which I assume stands for unsort. which probably means that these are in the order that they're actually listed in the bibliography file. So let's look. M. Smith should come first, and A.B. Jones should come second, according to the references on the poster themselves over here. If we look at the sample.bib file, the first one is Smith, and then Jones. So yeah, that's what that did. Looking right there at the word unsort, UNSRT, if you did plain, then it would probably just list them in reverse order. Doesn't really matter. As long as they're listed, it doesn't matter. Okay. And then it's got it calls forth that file that we have over here, sample.bib, by just putting the word sample there. Okay. Because that's what the file is called. So then they have the contact information box. Again, like I said, if you put your contact information up here in the header, you may not need this box. You may put something else there. But the contact information box, this is the first use of compressed list. So that's what that's good for. It compressed the list down so it didn't have a lot of space between the lines. Kept it small. The header box was called contact information. The name is just contact. It's in column 1 because it's aligned with in the column that the introduction box is in. And it's aligned with equals to references and above equals bottom. So the above equals bottom places at the bottom, but then it says align the top of it, basically. Align the top and bottom of it with the references box because I want it to be the same size. So that's what that's doing. And then you fill it with what you need. You may need more room than this there, so it really depends on the content you have to put in your boxes. So it is a little bit harder to do this one than the other one, but if you draw out your design first and what you plan to put in each thing, then it makes it easier for you to kind of get a template and then start filling in the stuff. So I recommend drawing this out on a piece of paper before you get into here and start trying to do it, because you'll probably try to pull your hair out otherwise. So next is the future research box, and they did a similar thing here. Obviously there's the title, future research. There's the name. Overly longly worded name, but we won't have to reference in that one very much. Column equals 2, span over 2 to fill up the rest of it. Aligned with references, again, above bottom. So that placed at the bottom, aligned it with the references of the thing, so that all three of these guys look perfectly aligned. All right, it's kind of nice that it does that. Then now that we've listed the bottom ones, we can list the materials and methods or any boxes we want to go in the center. And so materials and methods comes next. Of course, we titled it that here. Name of that particular box is just called methods. It's in column 0. And to get it to fit nicely between objectives and references, we say put it below the objectives box. So we're calling back to objectives, and above references box. So it makes it align really nicely between those two things and gives the perfect amount of spacing between them. The only way the perfect amount of spacing won't happen is if you have too many words in that box. And it will try to bleed over into the next one, but that's why you kind of have to be playful with your wording a little bit to make things concise in the way you word stuff. All right, so then they filled their stuff in. I won't go in through all that, but they've got some other things that you might find useful in here. And now we're going to do the conclusion box, the last box we need to do. And notice it's just called conclusion, or whatever you might want to call that particular box. Named it conclusion. It starts in column 1. All right, so it starts in column 1. It spans over 3 columns this time, so it goes from column 1, 2, and 3. It's below the results box, so we're referencing back to the results box here. We probably could have said introduction as well. It probably would have been okay to do that. And it's bottom aligned with the method box we just made, so that bottom line right here aligns with the bottom line of the materials and methods. And so it's kind of important that you align the things so they look good. Again, these are things you can fix as you go. Not something. And they actually did use the TIX style stuff in here and a TIX picture here. The TIX style is something you haven't seen before because we didn't cover this, but it's a way to pre-draw a shape and then to be able to call forth that. So it says TIX style decision, TIX style block, TIX style line, TIX style cloud. These are definitions of the actual image there. And then in the begin and end TIX picture, you'll notice the word block, cloud, decision, line, and that's how they've started to draw the image. So it's another way you can draw a TIX image like that. Okay. They use the compressed list, like I said earlier, on that middle set of bullet points there, and then they did not use it on the description list that they used last. All right. Description's one I don't think we used very much, but description allows you to put whatever descriptor you want here. Although I think you can do that with itemized as well. You can put, if you want it to be something other than bullets, you can always put brackets there, and it will change that up. And that's it. You'll notice on the template you download, you'll have this results too. I have it commented out because if I uncomment it, it will screw up this poster drastically because of the way I have it set up. But you'll probably find that you're going to do a different setup. And if you run into some issues, I'm here to help you. Do not think you have to do this bad boy on your own. I do prefer you use this method. And I will say it's a little harder, so don't put it off to the last minute. But if you run into an error or you want to help with trying to structure it the way you want it structured, send me your link that you're working on. Maybe a picture of the image of what you want it to hopefully look like as far as the structure is concerned, and we can work on it together to help get it to where you want it to look. At the end of the day, I want it to look good for you. I want you to make the final decisions on the overall colorations and things like that, but at the end of and how you structure it. But at the end of the day, it's your poster, and I'm just here to help you along, get it to look the way it needs to look. So don't hesitate to reach out to me if you don't get something to work the way you want it to work, or if you're having issues with this. All right, I've had to help many people with these posters, regardless of whether it's this style or the AO. So don't think you have to do it all yourself. I think I've mentioned everything I want to mention, and I won't go on any further with you. But good luck with this stuff, and remember, we're going to have a research check 2 and 3 down the line. Research check 3 is where I really need to see some Beamer slides from you because it'll be a few weeks before your actual presentation, so we need to be finalizing those things at that point. And your poster is going to be due the same day, so you want to have some semblance of your poster and be working on that by the time you get to research check 3. I'm going to expect to see those things from you. Research check 2, would like to see some outlines of how you're going to format your stuff, but don't need to see the finalized project. But if you start on the stuff and have something to show me earlier, that's fine too. But start working on this stuff now. Beamer first, poster second, so that you can get these things rolling and you're not sitting there at the last minute working on stuff, because there's going to be nothing else to do other than your research checks. And I'll let you know more about those when we get closer to them. So anyway, gang, good luck, and talk to you later.